Welcome to Ethics Matter. I'm Stephanie Tsai. We're talking about the intersection of ethics, the environment, and economics with filmmaker Shalini Kantayya. Her most recent documentary focuses on the potential of solar power to create economic opportunities for working-class Americans. And that film, called Catching the Sun, is listed as a New York Times Critics' Pick. Shalini, welcome. It's so nice to meet you.
Thanks so much for having me.
You have described yourself as an unlikely environmentalist. Talk about that.
Well, a couple of things. The environment has been talked about as it's something exterior to who we are. The environment is happening somewhere over there. And I think I consider myself a deep ecologist, which means I believe deeply in the interconnection of all things. I came to this work not as an environmentalist, but as someone who really cared about the underdog and really cared about the American dream. And what I saw in cities like Richmond, California, where one of my films takes place, is that the American dream is being eroded by the legacy of fossil fuels. And I really saw that we have the opportunity to both create a more sustainable future for our environment and at the same time uplift the dreams of working people across the world. And so that's what I'm committed to.
It's interesting because you come at the issue in Catching the Sun not necessarily from an environmentalist standpoint at all. It really comes down to these characters that are looking for work. What brought you to that approach?
When I first visited Richmond, California, I was really moved by this sort of old oil refinery town. The 20th century industries have sort of left a community with high rates of asthma, cancer, unemployment. And I discovered this little gem of a program called the Solar Richmond program that was helping unemployed Americans try to retool for the industries of the future, for jobs in the solar industry. And I saw a glimmer of the kind of transformation that could happen in cities across the country, which is sort of rebooting and retooling working Americans for jobs in the industries of the future. And I could really see that renewable energy has the capacity to sort of transform the lives of people all around the world. So that inspired me to make this film called Catching the Sun, and meet some of the inspiring people who are leading that transition.
One of the reasons that there is an increasing demand for solar energy is that it is no longer this very expensive technology. So it's a reality that there's a demand for workers that can install solar panels.
Absolutely. I think what first inspired me was meeting a young character named Eddie, who's featured in my film. And here is a young man who didn't have even entry-level work opportunities. And I saw the light go on in his eyes when he made a radio play off of solar energy. And I saw him beam with pride as he explained to his neighbor how much money he'd be saving as a result of the work that he had done. And I could see firsthand the kind of transformation that's possible. And I learned this well-kept secret that even today, there are 200,000 workers in the solar industry. In the making of my film, the industry has almost doubled size.
Right, and that's just in the United
And that's
States,
just here in
where the industry is far smaller than it is in other countries, including Germany and China.
Absolutely, and that's because we haven't had consistent long-term policy. And here, already in so many states across the country, solar energy is reaching grid parity with dirty fossil fuel industry, which means that—
In other words, it costs the same amount to produce.
Exactly. It costs the same amount or cheaper. And it all depends how you do the math. If we factored in the kind of pollution that the fossil fuel industry puts into the lungs of our kids and the amounts of asthma and cancer and birth defects that are caused by the legacy of fossil fuels, that math would be even greater, and the push for the math and the economics behind solar energy would be even greater. But even without that, solar energy is reaching grid parity. It's already reached grid parity in 80 countries across the world. And you're seeing countries that never had a grid system in the first place leapfrog the grid and go directly to solar energy. And the cost benefits are immense. We have to remember that this is a device that is renewable. The sun is free and shines all over the world. And as we begin to harness that, it has almost zero marginal cost, which means there's almost no cost in upkeeping this technology. So, leaving this massive existential crisis that we need to solve called climate change, renewable energy is about national competitiveness in the industries of the future, and is largely makes good economic sense all over the world.
Let's unpack some of what you said, because you referred, for example, to the public health impacts of the fossil fuel industry. And it seems like you make the case, not just an economic case in this film, but you make a case for income inequality and how the fossil fuel industry has fueled that. And there is a social justice aspect to that as well.
Absolutely, and it's something I wish were more widely discussed, which is, the electrification of the United States was thought to be the biggest engineering achievement of the 20th century. Essentially, we created these monopolies, and government created these entrenched interests. So in essence, because of the amount of infrastructure it takes to actually dig dead things out of the ground, to burn them, to spin steam turbines, to ship it more than 100 miles from where you produce energy, is largely inefficient and creates and requires a great deal of infrastructure. And so that essentially has created a 1% in this country. The fossil fuel industry has consolidated wealth and power in the hands of a few. And I think the big, sexy, provocative idea about solar energy, which I wish more people would understand, is that solar energy has the capacity to democratize and decentralize energy in a way that puts power, both literally and figuratively, in the hands of ordinary people. And if you pass the right policy, like in California where they have net metering, which essentially means that instead of you paying the utility actually pays you when you put solar on your rooftop at really competitive rates. And that's why technologies like solar are disrupting the fossil fuel industry and putting more money into the hands of the middle class.
So I understand it's still only about 1% of energy capacity in the U.S. Solar, if you put wind in there, it gets up to 5-6%. About 5% of Americans have installed solar panels. So we're talking about still a relatively, very actually small industry compared to the fossil fuel industry. Do you see that changing, or do you see that the sort of lobbying efforts of fossil fuel industry continue to influence policy in a way that just further calcifies the existing system?
Well, even with that small margin, the solar industry today employs more people than the coal industry. And it is more job intensive than the fossil fuel industry. And they're infrastructure projects, which is the way that we create job growth. So even with these small margins of growth, we're creating a massive amount of jobs in the solar industry. Going back to your question, industries like solar have the fossil fuel industries shaking in their boots. They call it a death spiral because essentially it doesn't make sense anymore to make energy 400 miles away from where you're using it. The most efficient way and the cleanest way to make energy is where you use it. And so I think we have the fight of our lives going on because people have consolidated wealth and power through fossil fuels. And
political power.
And political power.
As well. And how do you sort of change that trend? I mean, are market forces enough? I mean, you talk about in your film about There's an expert who talks about how this is a $1 trillion industry, potentially, renewables. And yet China is far and away crushing the US when it comes to the development of solar energy and other renewable energy. So how do you see that changing without political will?
I think we have an industry that's running roughshod over our democracy. We have more lobbyists in the fossil fuel industry than we actually have members of Congress. And this is a problem. And we see the way that that has sort of created a 1%. I think the hope that I have is really that young people understand that this is about innovation. This is about national competitiveness in the industries of the future. China, who hardly is synonymous with Greenpeace or doing things for the sake of the environment, has sort of identified sustainable technologies, renewable energy technologies, as a key market that they want to be a leader in. And not because of issues primarily of the environment, but because they understand that this is what is going to grow their GDP in the next century. And so if we don't lead in the innovations and the technologies of the future, we risk falling behind economically.
You actually profile a Chinese entrepreneur in the film who has a dream of owning a solar energy farm on US soil. What story did you want to tell through that character?
Well, Wally, a character in my film, is an extraordinary character. He's a Chinese solar entrepreneur who is opening a big solar plant in Texas. And what I hope to show is this is what happens when we create smart, long-term policy that fuels leadership in the technologies of tomorrow. And you see Wally, who wants to do good, who wants to have sustainable technologies and wants to be a leader, but he also just wants to make a lot of money. And he's going to do that with solar energy. And so while we are tied up having this food fight in our Congress, there is someone who already understands that, leaving climate change aside, that this makes sense for the future, that this is how we become economically competitive in the next century. And the faster that we make a transition to clean energy, the more competitive our economy is going to become. And China already realizes that. And if we cede leadership to China, then we lose out economically and we lose out on jobs.
You also feature a character in your film that describes herself as a social and political conservative, and yet she is at the forefront of trying to draw attention to the ravages of climate change. Why was it important for you? Was it directly addressing the political polarity in the US around this issue?
Yes, because one, science is not a liberal conspiracy. It actually exists. And to see that there are people on both sides of the aisle that really want to make this transition. Libertarians love solar energy because this is about putting power in the hands of ordinary people. This is about energy independence. This is about people having control, and actually about a free market for energy. We don't have a free market for energy. For most of us, we get a utility bill, and whatever that utility is charging us, we have no choice but to pay. And so what Tea Party activists like Debbie Dooley, who's since become a friend, understand is that this is about creating a free market for energy and actually creating energy choice. And so that whether you are a left-wing liberal or a right-wing conservative Tea Party activist, that solar energy is still a good idea.
As you were making this film and talking to different people around the country, did you get a sense that this is, when we talked about solar energy in the late 1970s, it was sort of this hippie movement that wasn't necessarily grounded in political realities. Did you get a sense that we're at a tipping point in really embracing this technology?
Absolutely. Of course, it was hippies that sort of adapted this technology first in the 1970s when we had a crisis over energy under Carter. But that is not the industry that is emerging right now. People are seeing that this is a viable technology that is essential to our competitiveness. And as I began to talk to people, what I realized is that solar energy is not just something that is good for the polar bears and for fighting climate change, but it's something immensely good for our middle class, of building a strong middle class in our country. When you pass strong policy, as California has done, and I'm most excited about policies like net metering, because what it means is that to a working class family, to a middle class family who's struggling with huge energy bills, that solar is a technology that directly puts money back in their pockets.
And that's a state initiative, right? So, you know, a lot of people are talking about with this new administration the possibility that, for example, tax incentives to install solar energy panels, something like that. We don't know what the fate of a regulation is like that. You have sort of a call to action at the end of your film, which is much more about citizens that want solar energy talking to their city council officials and local and state government. Is that where the change is going to happen on renewable energy now?
Absolutely. I think that we are almost at a tipping point. The thing about energy, and I think the most exciting thing, is that with the federal government missing in action, we still have a tremendous amount of potential to act on this issue, because energy, like so many environmental issues, is a local issue. And so with the federal government missing in action, we can take this fight to City Hall, and we can take this to our local states. And the states have tremendous amount, and it's not just California. States like Maine, red states like Texas are going toward making major strides in the wind industry. And so people are realizing the economic potential, and this isn't about red states and blue states, this is about smart states and dumb states. States that are stuck in the fossil fuel and the entrenchment of a small 1% that is lobbying our government. And it's about the special interest versus the public interest. When you think about subsidies, what is a subsidy for? It's really for the public good. It's about us saying we care about clean air for our children. My family's from India. We have just seen dangerous amounts of air pollution in Delhi, where people are having to wear masks. We don't want to live in a world where our children have to wear masks before they can go outside.
And don't those health issues affect sort of the most vulnerable, not just children, but they tend to affect poorer areas in urban environments, certainly in this country, and definitely in India and in China?
Absolutely. I mean, while climate change affects everyone, it will go down on the backs of poor people, of women, and of vulnerable children all across the world. And at the same time, the exciting thing is this, is that those same communities, the communities like Richmond that are on the front lines paying the costs of fossil fuels, can be on the front lines of this transition. So communities that have the highest rates of asthma, we can make those transitions. So the Rust Belt, states like Michigan that led in manufacturing, we can't go back to those 20th century technologies. That's not where the jobs are anymore. Those jobs have gone overseas, or they've been outsourced by robots. They are not going to do this work. And so that we can lead not just on climate change, but on income inequality. And we can start to put Americans back to work in the renewable energy technologies of the future.
Do you think that program in Richmond is enough, or does it require huge sort of green revolution that the Green Party talks about.
Absolutely.
A huge investment of tax dollars into investing in green energy companies. Certainly, we saw that the Obama administration prioritized that and was criticized for it. Is that what we need, or again, is it something that can be done incrementally on the local and state level?
My hope would be that we would have a visionary type of leadership in this country that would lead us into a renewable future. But I think we can still use the levers of policy to make this change. And I think what I see at the state level are two things that really work. One is a renewable energy portfolio. And that means that we say to our utility that we intend to become 30%, 40%. California today runs off of 25% renewable energy, and they are now making the leap to run off of a third, 33% renewable energy by 2020. If every state would do that, that would add up to the kind of massive change that we need in our systems. We need to say to our utilities and signal to our business community that it is safe to invest in these technologies. This is our long-term plan. It is game over for this kind of pollution being dumped in our air without any taxes or without any kind of implications. I mean, these are companies that treat our air like an open sewer. As Van Jones says in my film, like, if you throw trash in the street, you're gonna get a fine.
Yeah.
But yet we allow people to dump megatons of carbon into our air with no tax.
Right.
In the absence of a carbon tax, a renewable energy portfolio, a signal to our business community is what we need. And the other kind of local policy that works is a net metering policy, which is a really bad kind of policy
wonky
term.
word.
It's a wonky word for a very sexy policy.
Right.
When I heard about this policy, I was like, wait a minute. I can put solar on my house. Some companies are doing it for essentially no money down. And instead of paying a utility, the utility can actually pay me. That is revolutionary. That is the democratization of our energy system. That is the redistribution of wealth in one of these large things. And it is happening state by state, local city, where cities like LA are making big commitments. Some cities have pledged to go 100% renewable energy. So this is the kind of policy change. Now, it seems crazy that we're going to make a change at our federal government, and like so many Americans, we feel disempowered at the state level. But the incredible thing is that we can go to our city council, and maybe there's some people from our high school that we know, and maybe just by 50 people showing up at our city council, they're like, what are all these people doing here?
Right.
And we can start to change city by city, state by state. And I believe this change is already happening across the country. So many states have these policy targets of saying, we are going to go 10%, we're going to go 20%, we're going to go 30%. And we are going to show our business community that we are ready to invest. The other thing I want to say that I think is really important is that we pride ourselves as a country as being innovators, right? This is where innovation has taken place. And yet, we've forgotten what it takes to be innovators. China already understands. You have to throw spaghetti on the wall.
Well, some would say, I mean, just to play devil's advocate
Yeah.
a bit here, fracking was one of the great innovations of energy production in this country. It's been sort of a game changer. What's interesting about fracking is there was a Pew Research survey that showed that 65% of Americans would prefer we prioritize investing in developing renewable energy technologies versus some 26% that said put it all into fossil fuel exploration. Is renewable energy also the more ethical alternative?
I believe so. I mean, the vast majority of our scientists have consensus about bringing down our carbon emissions. If you don't believe them, I don't know what to say. We are beyond the.
No, we're not going to have that debate.
We're not going to have that debate. And so, if you understand, take for instance, I deeply believe in the American dream. My mother came to this country as an immigrant, and she has given her life to making sure that I had a better life. Mm-hmm. Now, I believe that it is part of our duty to leave a ladder of opportunity for our children, to be able to look a child in the face and say, I'm going to give you a better life than I had. To me, that better life includes leaving them clean air, leaving them clean water, right, and leaving them a ladder of opportunity so that they can have a job that is dignified. And we have to think about what kind of jobs. When I saw Eddie, a character in my film Transformed, he didn't want a job at Chevron. He knew how dangerous that was. His father had gotten asthma from the same industry and died, actually, of lung cancer. And he said, and I saw him beam with pride, and I realized it's not just about having a job. It's about having a job that has meaning. It's about having a job where you know you are meaningfully contributing to making a better life for your children. And I believe we have the capacity to do that in this country. And what we need is the political will. And let's not be confused. The political will is us, right? It's about everyday citizens saying, we care about this and this is what we value. And you are going to either do the people's bidding or we're going to take your seat from you in the next election. And that's what it comes down to.
Well, I think that is a great note to end this conversation of Ethics Matter on. Shalini Kantayya, thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
For more on this program and other Carnegie Ethics Studio productions, visit carnegiecouncil.org. There you can find video highlights, transcripts, audio recordings, and other multimedia resources on global ethics. This program is made possible by the Carnegie Ethics Studio and viewers like you.